Hello, everyone. Hello, Misha. How are you? Been looking at your work online. It's always beautiful work, and you are first today. Yes. Hello, Angela. It's always great to see you. Gosh, I miss walking in Spain and being in Russia, and with Giovanni, ciao Giovanni, being in Italy. Thank you, Katrine. I'm so glad that you love the paint. I know I'm getting the travel bug back again. I really want to travel. Um, and that's looking very promising next year. So that's good for all of us. Hello, Claudia. Yeah, I'm doing good here in Seattle. It's getting colder. In the mornings, it's about 34 degrees, so about 2 degrees above freezing. 34 degrees Fahrenheit. So kind of cold. Hello, Kristen. Hello, Nancy. Yep, it's a Good Friday. So thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. Um, we had a discussion last week about how to read the legend, how to understand the color chart. I think it's a very, very powerful tool for you as an artist over a cup of coffee. You can actually understand the why of a color you're using. Um, it just, I like that it puts you as the artist in power of the tool. Um, to me, that's always the best thing is that the artist has the power. So what I want to do today is start going over, we'll go over how paint is made. We'll go over some of the characteristics of paints. One of them that I'm always asked quite a bit, hello Rosemary, of Parish, is if I know the pigment, will the paint between different manufacturers be the same? What makes PB 29 different? What makes PB 2036 different? I'm going to go over that today so you kind of get the different understandings. It's kind of fun. And then down the line, we'll start using colors so you can see how they work with one another. I'll be showing you the minerals, etc. So if you have questions, be sure to ask. It allows me to put together the presentation because I want it to be powerful for you. Okay, so I'm going to put this down here. And let's start by, this is how we make paint. Okay, I'm going to bring this up a little bit, try to get it where everybody can see. And what's important to me here is how we make paint works kind of like a clock. Hello, Mel. Um, it starts with and ends with the artist. For us, for us as a company, you are the most important. Uh, it's not just about making stuff. We enjoy making stuff as manufacturers, but our focus is the artist. It starts with the artist and it ends with the artist. So this is the most important right here, this component, the artist. I send Bruce, and I'll go over this in a second. I send Bruce as the mineralogist for minerals to source out minerals. And then from mineral, we process those minerals by using equipment, which I will show you, into pigment. From pigment, we make it into paint. From paint, it goes into the tube. From tube, it goes to the artist. So that's kind of how our clock kind of works, with the artist being the start and the finish. Oh, that's fantastic. Hello, Raffaele. So Mel's going to paint over the holidays, which is great. Um, okay, so the neat thing about art, it's been done for throughout the ages. Wherever there's been humans, we have, I think, the innate need to express ourselves. It's really, really important to us. I've been to seven of the continents on Earth, and every 7 continents have 6 of those continents have artwork. And I'm sure Antarctica, having land underneath it, if there were humans, there's probably artwork in Antarctica. It is today because a lot of the scientists going there do artwork. There's 2 places that we can get pigment. We can get it from the earth, ochres, siennas, the primitex, etc., hematites, sodalites, apatites, etc. Or we get it from the laboratory. The quinacridones, the pyrroles, the parylene, the what other families? Quinothalones. So just about all the families, many of the families, come from the laboratory. And when you think about the two, there's the difference between the two is the earth. You can tie back for eons. You can see it on totem poles. You can see it on artwork in France on caves. You can see it in Australia. Tends to be more granulating because there's I call it perfect imperfection, in that some of the pigments are bigger than others, some are heavier than others, and that causes that granulation, which we'll be looking at today. In the laboratory, they're more perfect. Think cars, car industry, a lot of the printing industries, the pigment has to be perfect. If you get a granulating car, they call that a recall. So paint from the car industry is going to come from the synthetic world, where it's perfection. When we do the primitex again, our geologist Bruce right here, Bruce Wood. Let me bring that down. There we go. So Bruce sources the minerals, and then we purchase the mineral. And from the mineral, looking forward to seeing you too, Tarun. We put it inside of a jaw mill, and the jaw mill squeezes. And because crystals have lattices in them, they break very easily. And then once we get that, we put it into what's called a hammer mill. And the hammer mill, so here it starts about the size of a basketball. For a hammer mill, it starts about, from the golf ball, it goes to about the grain of rice. And from the grain of rice, we put it inside of the ball mill, and it goes to about 40 microns. Just thinking that this thickness of this piece of paper right here is 100 microns. So the particles are smaller than a human hair. They're very, 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 very small. Very small. And then after this step, it's not the end. Excuse me, just a moment, I'm sorry. Okay, so from here, there's still a lot of other steps that happen. For example, some of the minerals we will float in oil because it'll give us different levels. And then we'll just take the level off that we want over and over and over. But there's a lot of chemistry that happens after this, this step right here. Purifying steps. So once we have the mineral and it's purified, then we step into making it. And making it, yeah, that doorbell sounds like jingle bells, doesn't it? And making it, we use a vessel. And then in the vessel, what we do is we put the distilled water, the pigment, we mix that up, and then we start using our machines. And I'm going to show you that here in a second. For us, because we want no extra particles, no extra materials in our paint, we use distilled water. For you as an artist, you can use distilled. I would recommend that highly. You can use bottled water. I would recommend that. Tap water, well, you can use tap water. It's just going to have a lot of other things inside of it. It can have calcium, it can have fluoride, it can have other types of minerals, depending where in the world you are. Here in Washington, if you're out in the rural areas, the farmlands, we have lots of wheat fields, etc. Then you can have lots of different things in your water. So we always use distilled water. Once we use the distilled water, we use this machine right here. It's a mixer. Kind of about the same as what you would use at home, just gigantic. So here is lapis, and it's lapis distilled water being in with a mixer. The mixer can have one blade, or it can have a second blade called a sweep blade, which acts like a spatula and gets material off the side and throws it back into the center of the vessel. These are about right here, fully closed, is about 6 feet, about the size of my size. I'm 6'1", so, and then fully extended, this is about 18 feet. So very, very large. And this is the blade down here. It's about the size of a large dinner plate. And so all this is going to do is just like at home, it's going to put it into solution. Once we have it into solution, we're then going to go over to what's called a 3-roll mill. And this is a 3-roll mill. The 3-roll mill deaerates and disperses the pigment. So let me show you a picture of that. The 3-roll mill is made up of 3 rolls, and 2 of them move in opposite ways to each other. These two right here are moving in opposite ways. And what that does, it tears what we call the agglomerate. And the agglomerate is where there's an electrostatic charge and the particles want to be together. Well, if they're together, what happens when light waves come in, they bounce differently all the way around in all different directions. And this causes hot spots and cold spots. What you want to have is you want to have them lay more linear. And we do that by putting gum arabic around each particle. And that way there's uniform refraction. And therefore you have the maximum amount of color saturation. So we don't want this, we want this. And that's all about how we tear that particle apart over and over and over. The chemist has to make sure that it's where he wants it or she wants it. We have several chemists. And then what comes out is, at the end, is the paint. Okay? And that can take many, many steps. People ask me, they say, well, John, how many steps does it take, for example, to have a mineral go from the massive, what we call the big piece, all the way down to the 40 micron particle? And that can take weeks. And the reason that can take weeks is that the minerals are, the majority of all of them are crystals. And what you do is we cleave that crystal over and over and over and over, making it smaller every subsequent time. If you process it too much, you destroy the crystal. Now let me give you an example of that. If you take granular sugar, table sugar, and you go to the window with it and move it around in the window in the sun, you see all beautiful colors. You see yellows and reds and greens and blues, and that's because it's a crystal. If you take the same sugar and you turn it into powdered sugar, confection sugar, and you put it by the window, it's deader than a doornail, and that's because the crystal has been destroyed. So the one thing that we absolutely want to do when we're making pigment from these massives is not destroy the pigment, not destroy the crystal, because then the game is over. And the same thing happens to be with these machines, which I'm going to show you here in a second. You can have these, they're computer controlled. Ours are all computerized. They can go down to 10 microns. I mean, you and I would say, well, those those rolls are touching each other. No, they're not touching each other. There's 10 microns. The computer can move them apart. You and I can't even see it. But we can change, for example, the PB29, which is say the French ultramarine, which is a larger particle. We can actually change it to ultramarine if the rolls are too close. So it is really an art form and a science form simultaneously. So I'm going to go on and explain some of these other things. This is we've talked about this before. This is a photospectrophotometer. And what we do is we take any color, but we take our swatches and we present our swatch. This thing's on a hinge. It comes back. We put our color in front of this hole. There's a hole here. Put this back on. And there's a series of computers. And it will read, we're on the C lab, this falls. And then we're going to make the new color that we make, we're going to want to assure it's in the same place so we have continuity of color. So this is the machine we use for continuity of color. We don't use our eyes, we use this machine. This machine right here is the xenon phaedometer. And the xenon phaedometer is about the size of a Coke machine. It's about 6 feet high. So about 6 feet high. And it's about 4 feet wide. And inside of it, there's a turntable that goes around a central bulb. And in 4 days, we can do about 100 years of light. So this is how we test for light fastness. Everything we have, because we have a full laboratory, everything we do is always tested. Every batch we make is made in a small batch inside of our laboratory before that formulation is given to the production crew outside with the very large machines. So let me read some of your messages because I want to make sure I'm not getting too far ahead, and if you're asking me something, I'm seeing what it is. Hello, George. Good to have you. Yeah, so Paul, thank you very much for Raffaele for answering that. The Quinn Gold does come from a lab. It doesn't come from our lab. It was used to be made by Ciba-Geigy that I believe was just bought by BASF. But it was made for Toyota used a lot of it about 18 years ago, and when they no longer were going to make the gold cars, they didn't need that particular pigment anymore, so it was canceled. We bought the entire amount of it. We bought almost a ton of it, and it lasted just about 18 years. And we ran out about a year ago, year and a half ago. The same thing with Quinburn Orange. We just bought enough to last us 12 years, but Quinburn Orange, the shade that we use, is no longer made. Last year, if you didn't order it last year in the quantity that you needed, you'll never get it again. So, but we have enough. We bought enough for at least 12 years, if not more. Let's see. I took a tour of copper mine. Yeah, so Debbie says she took a tour of the Highland Valley copper mine, and the ball mills were the size of buildings. Yeah, they're mammoth. They're just mammoth. They're just awesome to watch. Ours are about the size of ours actually look like almonds. So they actually look like ours look like that. And the reason they look like that and they're not perfectly round is because when you have round, you have this space, right? You constantly have this space because the balls, when they touch each other, can't fit together. Whereas when it's this almond shape, there isn't that, right? So that's what we learned over time is we don't use round, we use these right here. And these are synthetic. They're super, super, super hard. On a Mohs scale, I'll go over the Mohs scale with you today. They run almost a 9. A 10 is a diamond. a 9 is quartz. These are pretty close to 9s. Very, 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 very hard. Okay, so let's continue. How's like my artwork? Was that pretty neat? Yeah. I'm just kidding. My artwork's not that great. Okay, I wanted to show you this picture just because it was sent to me today, and I think you would find this interesting. Let me do it this way. So this right here was sent to me by my chemist, Bruce, by my geologist, Bruce. Bruce is in Tucson right now. And this right here is called a shelf. And this man right here, he's a miner. He's standing on a shelf. And this is where they cut out for big slabs to make tables that are places that you cook on, etc. These are big slabs. So just he's standing on a massive slab. And this is sodalite. And so what we do is when they break these, unfortunately when they break them, you can see how perfect they've been cutting them. When they break them, we buy all the pieces that break. So they're able to make something off of pieces they can't use. So therefore nothing goes to waste. But it's just a massive area. And this is cut into the side of a hillside. It's just beautiful. I thought you might enjoy that. Let's see. The mixing is done in Seattle. So there's several companies. So Daniel Smith is actually several companies. One company is just this, and that's because the guys are dressed in space suits, for safety purposes. If this is a whole separate area, it's a separate city, and they then send to the other company the pigment, and then we process the pigment and have all the machines for color in Seattle, Washington. So probably about a mile from downtown Seattle. So Claudia says, several other minerals have black, white, gray, etc. Is this cleared out in the oil process, or maybe a shift or something like you said? So yes and no. Yes, that is certainly what we do when, for example, and I'll show you lapis here in a moment, what we do with lapis. We take out the any type of silicate, any type of quartz out of it. Some minerals, for example, the hematites, we don't take anything out of it because we want it to have that really awesome granulation. Garnets, we don't take anything out because garnets are extremely pure. We do take them out of matrix, which I will show you when I actually show you the actual minerals. So it really depends. Hematites, we won't do that. Tourmalines, we won't do that because they're part of the mineral. Let's see. Hello, Miss Bing. I'm just reading your messages here for a moment. So hair color Agnes says, interesting, the blue pigment in hair color is a large particle. You know, if it's hair color, it's probably not a pigment. It's probably a dye. And I will go over at a later time the difference between a dye and a pigment. We at Daniel Smith only use pigment. We use no dyes. Some companies use dyes. We do not do that. We use only pigment. And I'll go over the difference. The difference is solubility and whether they dissolve within their own matrix. But I'll go over that. I'll go over that more. So nice upset. Thank you, Tammy. Okay. Yeah, sodalite countertops. It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful mineral. So Valerie says, what's the story behind the DS logo? Dan Smith, Dan George Smith, the founder of the company, came from Minnesota, but he loved the Southwest, and he loved the look of the saguaro cactus. And even though we're based here in Seattle, founded in Seattle, where you'd expect more of an evergreen tree, he just thought the saguaro cactus was just so beautiful. So that's it. He just loved it. All right. Hello, Amat. Okay. So there is a story and a movie on a lapis, and it shows you all the equipment and how it's used. It's right here. It's at jjcindustries.com, or actually on Daniel Smith. If you can't find it by Google, let me know and I will send you the link. All of the Primitex we're going to look at a later time. I will show you each one of the minerals. Let me do it here. I'll show you each one of the minerals. That's pipestone, and then what its drawdown looks like. So we will go over each and every one of those. So Claudia says something that's actually pretty interesting, and that indulgent, I can't see them getting scratched. It's interesting. There's something called the Mohs hardness scale. Mohs hardness scale. And what that shows is the softest thing, each one of these, the one after it can scratch the one above it. So talc is a 1, and it goes from 1 to 10. It goes from talc to diamond, diamond being the hardest thing we know of. So talc, you could play Superman and put it in your hand, and you can crush talc. Think baby powder. So that's talc, and you can crush that in your hand, and that's because it has a very, very low Mohs number. It's a 1. It's the lowest. Or gypsum, which is your drywall on your house, gypsum. Then we have, for example, apatite, green apatite or blue apatite, and that's a 5. So 5 is way stronger than a 1. Then as we go up, we have quartz, which is a 7. We don't use quartz because you can't really, there's nothing you can see with quartz once you've processed it. We have lots of corundums, and they're 9s. So if you look at steel, steel is a 7, which means when we process our corundums, they actually can wear out, and they do wear out, those big, huge steel rolls right here, these big rolls. These big, huge rolls, they're only a 7. So those corundums, when we process them, they just wear our equipment out. And about every 2 years, it costs me about $50,000 to change out those rolls. When you have 5 machines, that gets quite expensive. But the majority of our Primitex fall in this area right here, between a 5 and a 9. They're very, very, very tough. So kind of getting back to you, Claudia, if it was steel and sodalite falls at a 6, it's actually kind of difficult to scratch it with metal because it's tougher than metal. Just very, very interesting. Your fingernail, for example, is about a 2.5. So your fingernail is actually tougher than the talc. No, Sandy, Quinburn Orange, the particular pigment that we use of Quinburn Orange, has been discontinued. We bought enough for 12 years. The one thing that we look at when we're really a pigment house, and we make sure we have, I would say the minimum we have is 7 years, and we go out to 25 years. So all of the Primitex, probably 15 years, and we constantly replace them. So we're constantly buying on the market, and to make sure that we always have continuity of color, we always have the pigment. So we don't have to issue changes because we have so much of the pigment. We're always making sure that we have plenty of it. So when a pigment is discontinued, we have a great deal in stock that we can use for a long time. So Nancy, the corundum is definitely used within the paint that we use. It's also made in jewelry. So lots of beautiful minerals that are corundums are used as jewelry. You have the rhodonites, etc. They're quite gorgeous. We're going to go over. So we're going to go over how to read or understand more about the pigment. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that right now, so we can go over that together. So let's do that. I think you'll find it interesting. So the pigment classification is done by a regulating body. So say PB29. It's done by a regulating body. And you can have a pigment, and they can be the same pigment, and there can be a difference. The difference can be because of size, which I'm going to show you. It can be because of chemistry, and I'll turn this over so you can read it. Chemistry, or it can be because of classification. Okay, so let's go over that because it's kind of interesting. Hello, Sue from Oregon, our neighbor to the south. All right, so let's look at ultramarine. This is ultramarine. I'm going to lift this up a little bit. The downside of lifting it up, you can see more, but then it gets kind of fuzzy with the camera for some reason. So here's ultramarine, and here's French ultramarine. They are the same exact pigment, PB29. Pigment blue, P is always for pigment. Pigment blue, number 29. Exactly the same. So this is ultramarine, and this is French ultramarine. The difference between these two colors, they're the same exact pigment. The difference between the two colors is size. The French ultramarine is a slightly larger particle, and so when light wave comes down and hits it, it refracts toward the warm or the red. Ultramarine is a smaller particle, and when the light wave comes down and hits it, it moves toward the cool or the green. And that's the only difference. It's the same exact pigment, same exact particle, just one is bigger than the other. French ultramarine, bigger than ultramarine. Okay? So that's because of size. So now let's look at another one. Okay. This is quinacridone violet, PV19. I think that's right. Yeah, no, that's PV1P. Anyway, it's PV19. Pigment violet number 19. Quinacridone violet watercolor, PV19. This is quinacridone red. This is PV19. This is quinacridone rose. This is PV19. PV19, PV19, PV19. So just knowing that something's PV19 doesn't tell you what shade it's going to be. And the shade is what's going to, for you as an artist, for me as a person looking at color, is going to tell us what the color looks like. Okay? This is because of chemistry. So let's look at that for a second. Hello, Tess from Ireland. So, quinacridone, 5 rings. It's a 5-ring molecule. 5 rings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, quinacridone. And the thing that gives the quinacridone the color is where the alpha and beta particles go. If there's a beta particle here, and there's a beta particle here, and an alpha here, and an alpha here, if you move these particles on this molecule, they give you the different colors. And that's what's causing PB19 to have different colors here, is because of where these alpha and beta particles fall. That's all done by the chemistry house that creates this particular pigment. Very, very complex amount of steps. I believe there's almost 22 steps that have to be done to create a quinacridone. It's one of the reasons they're expensive. They're very, very complex. But here we're seeing the difference in color because of chemistry. Here we see the difference in color because of size. Okay, let's see a third one. And the third one was classification. So here we see cerulean blue chromium, very pretty color, and we see cobalt turquoise. These are both PB36, pigment blue number 36. So I'm asked, well, John, do you do anything to make them those colors? No. This is because the pigments were classified by the coatings company as being PB36. They don't look anything like each other, but they're both PB36. But the pigment for each one of these has a different chemistry. Okay? So PB36, PB36. All right, so we've seen it by classification. We've seen it by chemistry. We've seen it by size. So just knowing what the PB is, what the number is, doesn't guarantee the color you're going to see. And that's why it's super important to look at a color chart. The shade, when you talk about shade, you get into some really, really heavy-duty chemistry. Really, really, really heavy-duty chemistry. I know some of you would really enjoy that greatly, and that's why you can actually look this up on Google and get into some real, you can get really into the chemistry, the inorganic chemistry, the organic chemistry of the molecular structure. For most people, they don't want to see that, but I just want to bring it to your attention. Yes, so Mary says each manufacturer has their own neutral tint and what they use. That's correct. You mentioned yesterday Cascade B. You mentioned yesterday Cascade Green doesn't have PB29. So if I said PB29, that was incorrect. And let me show you. So what size particle is PB29 compared to the size of ultramarine? So for French ultramarine, the French ultramarine is probably 30, 37, 38 microns, and the ultramarine probably is about 30 or 32 microns. Well, it doesn't seem like a lot. It's a lot. It's a real difference in size. When we come to the Cascade Green, so let me show you the Cascade Green. Here is the Cascade Green. And Cascade Green is a co-precipitated pigment. So it's actually one pigment. It's classified as being one pigment, but it's made of two pigments that are co-precipitated. They're fused together. And those two pigments are the raw sienna, PBR, this is pigment brown, number 7, PBR7. So it's made with PBR7, and it's made with phthalo blue. Okay, so it's made with raw sienna and it's made with phthalo blue. All right, so not PB29. If I said that, Dina, then I misspoke. It's made with raw sienna and with phthalo blue. These are the two pigments that are co-precipitated into one pigment to make the Cascade green. And when you put the water, it breaks it apart, and that's why you see the different colors within the Cascade green. Okay. Thank you for asking that, by the way, Dina. Okay, so here we have lapis, and this is lapis. This is genuine lapis. It's very baby blue, and baby blue is with 80% lapis. This is 80% lapis. So, and we process this ourselves. This is about $4,000 a pound on the open market. If it were 90%, it would be north of, I'm sorry, I said 4,000 a pound. It's $4,000 a kilo, about $2,000 a pound. At 90% pure, it's about between $25,000 to $30,000 a kilo. This is the ultramarine. This is the synthetic form of this natural pigment. The reason you know when you look at museums and you see lapis this blue, you actually do see lapis this blue in museums, and that's because it was the church, it was a country, or it was royalty, and this was the same price as gold back in those days. So it just said, you know, it screamed out, I have extreme wealth. Today, you can paint with lapis. We sell it. It's baby blue, and that's because if it was this blue, it'd be like $180 a tube. It's be really super expensive. Nobody would buy it. So the way people ask me about lapis, I say, if you want to paint like the masters and use lapis, this is a good lapis to use. But it is a baby blue. If you just want to use a beautiful synthetic form of lapis, you know, you can use this. This is about $9 a kilo. This is about $4,000 a kilo. Lots of difference between the two. So Dina, I'm going to go over that in a second because that's a beautiful question. Thank you. Dina says, how do we know which pigments are co-precipitated? I'm going to share that with you. And then sometimes you'll ask questions and I start going down the path because it's a really good question and I miss talking about something, which then I'll just bring up at another time. But some of your questions are just so good, I want to be able to answer them so everybody hears the answer. So Valerie, no, not all, the pigment that we use isn't the pigment that other people uses. Our chemists pick very, very particular pigments. We test those because we have a full laboratory. It's probably only two, maybe three paint manufacturers in the U.S. I know two. I know Golden has a laboratory. There's not many of us that have full laboratory and full chemistry, full chemists. We pick the absolute best because we want to give the best to our customer. Again, for me, it starts with the customer and ends with the customer. So not everybody uses the same pigment. Okay, so that's lapis, and let's go over quickly the blacks and the whites, and then I'm going to go over the granulation and mixing pigments together, which seems for some of you, you really want to know about that, and I really love that. There's not many pigments that are co-precipitated. I'm going to show you Moonglow, and I'm going to show you Shadow Violet and how we make those, which is different than co-precipitated. They don't need to be necessarily co-precipitated. There's ways of mixing them, and I'm going to go over that with you. So here are 4 blacks. Again, if I go over something, you say, boy, you know, I wish John would have maybe talked a little bit more about that, etc. Leave that in the comments. I always read the comments, and I'll go over that next time. So there's never anything at a loss. I'm absolutely open to doing that. So here's the four blacks, and we have lunar black. So lunar black is the same thing as Mars black, and it's a synthetic. The interesting thing about lunar black, it's a single pigment synthetic. So you would never expect a single pigment to granulate. Why is that? Because they're all the same shape, they're all the same size, they're all the same weight. And when they dance, they should all dance together. So there should be unified movement all the time, but there's not. And that's because these particles are really, really, really small. They're almost nanoparticles. And they don't want to be with each other, which causes this great, great granulation. But you wouldn't expect that within a synthetic. It just happens to be very unique for this particular pigment, lunar black. We have other lunars, but they contain more than one pigment, which we'll go over at a later time. But beautiful, beautiful granulation. The next black we have is ivory black. And ivory black has a slight yellow tint to it. You can kind of see it a little bit. So ivory black, another black, slight yellow tint. Black tourmaline, you'd expect it to be a granulating pigment because genuine means it's a primatech. So it granulates. So it is a natural. Okay. And then lamp black is our darkest black, our blackest black, if you will. And lamp black the name comes from, it used to be that in the old days they would put lamps underneath a piece of canvas, for example, and the soot would go to the top, and then they'd get a broom and they'd beat the top of it to release the soot, and from that they would create a black. So it would be called lamp black. It'd be called lamp black. Okay? So the blackest is the lamp black. Okay. So I'm going to go, what I'll do, Angela, is I'm going to go over all the families with you, and I'll make sure when I go over the families, I'll go over the other lunars, which are actually mixes. They're using more than one pigment. Because those more than one pigments have different weights and different sizes, you get the granulation. Okay, here's whites. And for the whites, there's four. There is the titanium white. There's the titanium white right here, titanium white. You can see it over black, and then here it is over white. Kind of see the darkness of the lines a little bit there, a little bit of shading. Okay, this is Chinese white. Very, very close to each other. So Chinese white, titanium white, gray titanium, and buff titanium. So if we look at the titaniums for just a moment, titanium white, right here, is PW6. Buff titanium, right here, is PW6:1. Pigment white number 6:1, shade 1. And then gray titanium is PW6. If I was probably the head of the coatings, I would have called titanium PW6, buff titanium PW6:1, which it is, and I would have called gray titanium PW6:2. But they didn't, and that's how sometimes it's hard to know just from a classification what color you're looking at, because these look nothing alike, and yet they're both PW6. This one's also different, but at least it's PW6:1. Okay. The Chinese white, people ask me, well, what's the difference between the Chinese white and the titanium white? This is about 50 years that the Chinese has been around historically, so it's been used for hundreds of years. If you were adding this or this, you can add either the Chinese white or the titanium white to the watercolor to make it more opaque. Um, that that is what gouache does. Gouache doesn't use the best pigments all the time, um, but gouache is made to be opaque. It was made for the photography industry, so you don't have that glare coming back at you. You could do that with any watercolor by adding either Chinese white or titanium white. Really, the choice between these two is just your choice as the artist. Yes, PB15 is a phthalo pigment. That is absolutely correct. And for the phthalos, it's for the phthalo blue. There's phthalo blue green shade and phthalo blue red shade. One is a 15 PB15:3, and that's the green shade. And the other, the red shade, is PB15:6. Very beautiful pigments, very strong pigments. Chinese white, Dina, is pigment white number 4, PW4. Titanium, PW6. So there's several pigment blue 15s. Yes. And again, it's that shade difference that causes them to be whether they're a blue shade or a red shade. Okay, so let's go over. So these two pigments right here, I'm going to go over with you. And one is shadow violet. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. One is shadow violet, and one is moon glow. Both these take 3 pigments. And the neat thing about them is moon glow, for example, I put as an example here, is how I explain granulation. So moon glow is made up of 3 different pigments. It's made up of anthracenoid red, ultramarine blue, and viridian. And because those 3 different particles have different weights, the anthracenoid red, which is very light, stays up at the top. The ultramarine blue, a little bit heavier, goes to the middle, for example. And the viridian, which is the heaviest, goes to the bottom. And so as you use rough paper and you put water to it, that's why it travels. These particles travel at different lengths, and it gives us this granulation. It gives us that beautiful granulation. Okay. So what they're made up of, let me show you. Okay, so moon glow, this one, moon glow, we take 3 pigments. We take viridian, we take ultramarine blue, we take anthracenoid red, and we take these 3 pigments dry. They're pigments, they're dry. And we mix those together, and then we add our gum arabic as our binder, the distilled water, etc., to create one paint, moon glow. So moon glow, while it's made of 3 different pigments, it's only one color. That's why you can mix moon glow with several other colors. You can mix it with several other colors and not get mud, because while it contains 3 different pigments, in how we mix it and how we encapsulate it, it's really only one color. All right? Let me explain that a little bit more. If I took anthraquinoid red in a tube, because we sell anthraquinoid red, if I took ultramarine in a tube, because we sell it, and if I take viridian in a tube, because we sell it that way, and I mix these three together, it's not going to give me the same result as this. That's because this has gum arabic, because it's a color in a tube. This has gum arabic, it's a color in a tube, and this has gum arabic. So you're mixing three different things together, which is not going to be the same as this. These are mixed dry, and the pigments are all dry mixed together to be homogeneous, and then we add the binder, etc. So you're not going to get to the same place using this and this and this, even though they're components of this. They're only components of this as a pigment. These are individual paints. Okay. Oh, so Joanne, good question. If you took the three pigments and mixed them together, could you get the moon glow color? You'll get something close, but you won't get this, because these already have gum arabic in them. So no, I mean you can get close, but you won't get the granulation, the beautiful granulation that you get here. In fact, what I'll do as we spend more time, I will take the three colors, I will mix them together, and we'll see what we get. How's that? I love doing that, so I'd be glad to do that. So when we have a mix of color, I will tell you it's a lot of chemistry to mix colors. The amount of perfection that you have to do is really, to get continuity of time and time and time again, it's a lot of work for the chemists. But it's a lot of fun too. No, it's not because the paint in the tube is not pure. It's about each one of these colors is going to have gum arabic with it, right? So anthraquinoid red in a tube is the pigment anthraquinoid red within a gum arabic. So you're putting a paint that has gum arabic with a paint that has gum arabic with a paint that has gum arabic, and you're mixing those three together. If you're just mixing these out of the tube to get something that looks like moon glow, I will say looks like moon glow. It's not moon glow to look like moon glow. Whereas we take a pigment and no gum arabic, a pigment and no gum arabic, a pigment and no gum arabic. We mix those three pigments together to the homogeneous, and then we take that and we add gum arabic to just that. So this is going to look different than that, and it's just because of the amount of reflection and refraction that happens. Here, when these three are mixed together, because they're separate colors that are already in gum arabic, the light wave has to go into this gum arabic before it bounces back, right? And you've added three layers of that. Here, it's just going through one layer. So it's going to look different here than it is here. I hope that answers. If not, what I love to do, what makes me always feel super good, is I'll take these out and we'll try them. We'll have some fun with it. I'm super open for that. Oh, that'd be neat, Debbie. I'd love to see what you guys come up with your own moon glow. That'd be awesome. Okay, so I just think that moon glow, this is a really, I get asked about quite a lot about granulation, and George uses granulation. George is phenomenal at using granulation. Claudia, I've seen a lot of Claudia's work, and she's, as I'll be talking about luminescence, while she does a lot of different artwork, phenomenal in the luminescence. Giovanni uses the granulating colors. They're just neat to understand them and kind of why they are what they are, why they behave what they do. I'm also asked, well, do I get granulation only on cold pressed paper because it has those depressions, etc.? No, you would get it on hot pressed paper as well. what you expect on hot press or smooth paper, so hot press or smooth, is that when you put the paint down, it's going to go out radially, like this, like a raindrop. So like a raindrop, like that. Whereas if I use it on rough paper, it's going to follow these like a riverbed. It's going to follow all these indentations like riverbeds, like this, right? So you get more of a linear dispersion. Just kind of need to play. So Jane's gray, we're going to have the same colors as individual tubes. What it allows you to do, what that allows you to do is now you can mix the moon glow, if you want, with several other colors, because it's considered, although it has 3 pigments, it's considered only one color. All right. So because the pigments have different weights, for example, the Primitex are very, very heavy. Some of the cobalts are heavy. In a tube, because we fill the tube from the top, from where the cap is, it's opened, it's closed at the cap, but opened at the top here. When we fill it from the top, because we have to come in from the bottom. We fill it from here up. Then we crimp this. It creates a little air bubble right here. If this is really heavy material, it will push the loose gum arabic to the top. If you see some, how it looks can look clear. If you see that, you get rid of it. You don't have to keep it. There's no reason to keep any gum arabic. The paint will always keep the amount of gum arabic that it needs. A good example of that, or a way to understand this, we go to the beach and we quickly scoop up a bucket of sand, and we wait about 2 minutes. We'll see very clear water at the top and then the sand underneath. If I get rid of the water at the top, the sand is still wet. So same principle. The pigment will always hold on to the amount of pigment it needs. You don't need to keep any extra. Pigment is like a living organism. It really decides how much binder it wants to hold on to, and whatever it decides to hold on to, that just becomes enough. No, you don't need to replace it if it's just the binder. Just you could put the binder to the side. You don't need to mix it back in. That's unnecessary. You could just discard it. Yeah, I think what I'll do for next time, we talked about a pan or a tube if it's left open, if the cap is left open by mistake, and I do this lots of times, I'll leave the cap off. I'm going to leave a couple of them off and let them dry, and then I'm going to cut them down the center, and I'm going to show you that we can just use it as a big pan. So I will show that next time. I'll purposely leave a couple of caps off before our next Thursday or Friday just to have them dry out. Okay, those are the pieces I wanted to go over with you today. Please ask me your questions. I love your questions. It's really makes me feel great that you're able to help each other out by asking each other and answering each other's questions. That's phenomenal. Oh, what about old tubes? Should I throw them out? Nope. I think that's what everybody was responding to. No, you don't need to throw them out. I have watercolor tubes, and the retains are 23 years old, so you don't need to throw them out. Daniel Smith, I'm just talking Daniel Smith. You don't need to throw them out. If they've dried for any reason, I can show you of how to use them as a big pan. I'll show you that next time. We'll play with that. You can discard any of the gum arabic. You do not need to keep that. Thank you, Mary. That's absolutely correct. All right. Well, I enjoy my meetings with you. It's just awesome. If there's something that you start thinking about, oh, I wish I would have asked, whatever the question is, You can come back in here and add it because I read them 2 days before I give a discussion, so I make sure I answer it. Or you can just ask the question at the next time we have the presentation. So love answering your questions. It makes me feel really good. I learn stuff all the time. There's many things that you know that I don't know. You actually use the product, which is phenomenal for me to hear how you use it and what you like. And so with that, I want to thank you all for being with me today. I always appreciate it. I wish you health and safety for you and your family, and I will see you next week. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.